Hey girl, today we are kicking off a new series on discipleship. I have had many conversations with many of you who are listening right now, and I know that so many of you are hungry for discipleship. But what really is discipleship? Y'all, everyone seems to have like their own definition. Nobody even really knows what it is. And so my guest today is here to help us understand discipleship because this girl is quite the expert, dare I say, discipleship nerd. We're just going to call her out there like that. But she has a ministry specifically dedicated to discipleship. So she even has a podcast about it. Yeah, didn't know that there was that much to talk about. Y'all are going to find out there's tons to talk about in regards to discipleship. So for this reason, I know that we are going to get a lot out of this conversation. I say we because though Strength and Dignity Life is all about discipleship and Titus 2 relationships, there's always room to learn more. I mean, I don't know everything, y'all. And I know that this girl has a lot that she's going to share today that is going to be super beneficial, not just to you, but to myself as well. So if you have any questions about discipleship, keep it here because we're about to chop it up and unpack it. With our guest today, Courtney Lowman. Now, if this is your first time to the Strength, Dignity, Life podcast, I welcome you. My name is Apryl Ortiz, and every 7 p.m. California time, we release new episodes to help train and equip you to raise the standard on the culture and live out God's word in every area of life. So, if you haven't already, I want to encourage you, push that little button, follow and subscribe to this podcast so that you do not miss the next episode. I'm going to tell you that just a heads up, the next one that's coming out is with a crew that I like to call Triple Threat. They have so much wisdom that they're going to drop down on us, y'all, and you do not want to miss out. So do yourself a favor, follow, hit subscribe, and make sure that you become part of the Strength and Dignity Life Familia of podcast here. So here y'all go. Friends, we are here to talk about discipleship. And my guest, Courtney, knows quite a bit on the subject. Courtney hosts the Journey of Ruth Discipleship podcast. This podcast specifically encourages listeners to love Jesus, to study his word, and to reach others. Courtney interviews bold, passionate, and faithful Christian mentors who have a story to tell and wisdom to share. It offers encouragement, advice, and discipleship. And the conversations are sure to leave you inspired to find a community of mentors who will enrich your journey as a disciple of Christ. Friends, I mean, right there in itself, it tells you Homegirl is definitely the person to talk to on the subject. So, friends, if you would, here, I just want to welcome my dear friend, Courtney Lowman. Hey, Courtney.
Thank you. Hey, Apryl. Thank you so much for having me on the Strength, Dignity, Life podcast. I love what you talk about here on this podcast, and I'm excited to join you.
Girl, it's a joy. So, y'all, I met Courtney when I was out in Phoenix area and got to know her at a networking group that we're part of called Lift, Leaders in Fellowship Together. And
Yeah.
Courtney, right before I left, we had a conference and you were one of the speakers speaking on this particular subject.
Yeah.
And me and the girl with me were just like mind blown. We left that place super stoked and ready to just get out there and love on people and begin discipling others. Not like we don't already, but man, I mean, with much more depth, richness, I mean, just the love of Christ on all
Yeah.
of it. You had so much awesome things to say. So I'm excited to have you here today because I know that you're going to drop a lot of wisdom on each one of us. Okay, but talking about discipleship, like what was the catalyst? What was it that really stirred your heart to even start thinking about this? Maybe
Yeah.
even share a little bit of your story of like who you are, that kind of gives you that platform.
Yeah. I like to say that I had undesired discipleship. I was maybe a little bit of a reluctant disciple. And my husband here, he actually doesn't like that term. He's like, when have you ever been reluctant about anything you did in life? And I'm like, yeah, that's true. That's true. I am kind of one of those people that just goes for it no matter what. I grew up as a pastor's kid. And so my parents, of course, when you're the pastor's child, a lot of people have opinions
Yeah.
about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how you should dress, who you should date, how you should cut your hair, should you have tattoos, should you have piercings? I mean, like everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything. So my parents did something that I didn't necessarily know they were doing then, but I look back and I'm like, oh, I wonder if you knew that if you did this intentionally. What they did is they made sure that those people that had opinions were not allowed to speak into our life. The people that they allowed to speak into our life were those who had wisdom, not just
Ooh,
opinions,
that's good.
but wisdom. And so those, and sure, were they their opinions? Yes, but they, they wanted to make sure that it was backed up
Mhm.
with something wise or scriptural. And so they put those people on purpose in our life. We also often lived separate from family.
Mm.
Where my dad was pastoring, we didn't always have a lot of family around us. And so our church family became like our extended family. We didn't have grandparents in town. They became our grandparents. We didn't have aunts and uncles in town. They became our aunts and uncles. We didn't have babysitters. So what I mean is that my parents really had to rely on our church body to support our family, and they made sure that the people they were putting in our life were wise. So now I look back at that and I realized that that was my first introduction to discipleship,
Oh, wow.
was these women and men that would help me when I maybe wasn't making great choices.
Mm.
And sometimes what they became was a place where I could go for advice when I didn't want to go to my parents.
Mm.
And I know every parent, because I am one, like I want my kids to come to me. I want them to feel safe and secure and feel like they can come talk to me about anything, even those really hard things. But where do they go if they don't feel comfortable talking to mom or dad, or it's about mom or dad? Like, it doesn't matter how good of a job you do, even if it's like you've done such a good job that your kid's afraid to tell you that they want to move out and, go to college across country or something like that, like,
Yeah.
and they need someone to help them talk them through that. Um, they had given us those people before we even really needed them. So when we did need that wisdom outside of our parents, they were there. I went on to become a high school choir teacher and love the high schoolers, which I know some people think I'm crazy, but please don't put me in a classroom full of kindergartners. Mm-mm. No, I don't want the little kids. They cry too much and they don't understand sarcasm.
I
So
feel you, girl.
please,
I feel you.
please I love my kindergartner, but
Yeah.
not a classroom full of them. So I taught high school choir, and these kids would come into my office, and often after just one semester in my class, they would open up and
Mm.
talk about some really big life things with me. And I thought, is there no one else in your life that knows you better than I do that could give you some advice? And really, the truth was there wasn't. They had their parents and they had their friends.
Mm.
And if they didn't want to talk to their parents about it, they threw it out to their friends who didn't know any better than they did. Or even worse, they put it out on social media. And we know that is
Yeah.
like not good. So I felt honored to have that role and hold that role in their life.
Yeah.
But that was my first exposure to maybe this isn't something that everybody has in their life. Maybe this is something that everyone needs, Christian or not. We need that wise voice in our life.
Yeah.
And maybe this isn't something that is happening in everybody's life. So that kind of became my drive to figure out, our churches teaching people how to be disciplers, our churches understanding the need for mentorship and discipleship within their own four walls and outside of them. And do we really understand the power that discipleship can have on an individual's life and on the body of Christ as a whole? So that's how I got there. My husband was like, "Do you ever get tired of talking about discipleship?" The answer is absolutely not. I'm already a podcast geek. Like, I listen to
Yeah.
podcasts
Yeah.
more than I listen to music. So he was like, "You should start your own podcast." And here I am almost 4 years later and still haven't run out of things to talk about. So
Dude, that's awesome. That is so dope. So, first off, I'm going to say your parents sound dope, and I absolutely love what you're saying. And I just want to throw this out there. Y'all know that sometimes I throw this out on the podcast. I say, if there's something really good, but you don't really need it for yourself right now, put it in your back pocket, save it for later. And I think what she's saying in regards to like your parents specifically, that the way that they rolled with you and the way that they, kind of allowed people to speak into your life. Friend, when you are a parent, like, be like that.
Yeah.
Do that. That is a really good example for us, because I can tell you, I jacked that thing up plenty of times. You know what I mean? My kids are grown, poor them. But that is such great advice. I love that model that your parents gave you in that. But just even talking about discipleship, and I know I said it in the beginning, I'm going to say it again. When it comes to this idea of discipleship, there are a lot of different words that we use for discipleship, and we don't really know what they mean. And like I said, everyone defines it different. So there's like two things I want to throw out at you. One is like, how do you even define something like that? Because a lot of people, every church has their thing, and there's the ones that are down with discipleship. They're like, okay, you got to do this, and this is the most important, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, you go somewhere else, and
Yeah.
then they change it up on you, right?
Mhm.
And then there's different terms that I hear thrown out there that kind of all sound the same. So I've heard the word coaching, I've heard the word discipleship, and I've heard the word mentoring. So break it down for us. Help us understand this.
Yeah. I was just reading a study. There's two great studies out there. If someone's like, well, I love discipleship and I want to know more about it, there is a study done by discipleship.org that they did about discipleship in American churches. Now, we're talking specifically American context with everything that I'm going to say. And what they're seeing is that it's actually not the same in an international context. So yeah, which is pretty cool, and yet kind of convicting for us in the American culture. So discipleship.org did one, and then Barna did one alongside the Navigators. And what they found is that part of the reason why discipleship isn't happening is because no one has a clear definition of it. And they actually, at our church, sat down with some of our leaders and asked them to define what a disciple is and what a discipler does. And within the room, no one had the same definition. And so, you're saying like you're at one church and you get it, like you understand their like view of discipleship, and then you go to another church and they change it up on you.
Yeah.
And because of that, it makes it really hard to, I think, to talk to people in different ministries, because you're not always talking about the same thing. You think you're talking about the same thing, but you're not. So I will give you my definition just so that you guys know in this case. And I believe that if you would talk to somebody who is actually a disciple making church, you would see something very similar to this. And that is, discipleship is two people or a small group walking alongside one another, not one sitting underneath the other. It's not like a teacher-student relationship, but they're walking alongside one another, becoming more like Jesus in every area of life and creating more disciples. So that last part is the part I think that a lot of churches don't include.
Okay.
And this is the new part to me as well, because I think I've always understood that, first of all, it's two people meeting to become more like Jesus. It's not just about becoming a better mom, becoming a better person, but discipleship is about, how do I become more like Christ in every area of my life? Right. But it's not a teacher-student relationship. And a lot of people avoid discipleship because they're like, I'm not a gifted teacher. I wouldn't know what to say. Like, I don't feel like I know that much.
Yeah.
But if you think of it as like walking alongside somebody instead of like leading somebody, like to lead somebody is scarier than like, hey, we're just walking. We're just walking side by side, figuring things out together.
Yeah.
Right. But then the end goal of this journey is not just for you and I to be more like Jesus, but it's for you and I to be more like Jesus and then to go help others be more like Jesus. And if that last part doesn't help or happen, then we are not replicating disciples as Jesus asks us to do in Matthew, in Second Timothy. These are things that he commands us to do as followers of Christ, and we're not. I think people use those other words, coaching, mentoring, discipleship, because no one has a clear definition of discipleship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because, and I have realized this on my own. I go to places and I'm like, I'd love to come and do like a discipleship, a discipleship time or series with your women's ministry. And they're like, oh, I don't think that's for us right now. Or, talking to individuals, I'd love to set you up with a discipler. We did this at my church, and they're like, I'm good right now. You're good, or like, I don't really, or is the response actually, I don't really know what discipleship is, and I don't have time for anything else in my life, So they don't know. And so a lot of people were like, Courtney, you might get a lot more if you would use the word mentoring instead of discipling. Because the world understands mentorship. They don't understand discipleship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the quick rundown, I think coaching is when you are instructing somebody or training them, directing them in something. It could really be anything. Like there are podcast coaches that help you and I be better podcasters.
Yeah.
You can have a mom coach. You could have anything that you want. There are lots of coaches out there. Of course, we've got, those in the gym that help us exercise better.
Yeah.
You've got coaches and they are helping you, directing you in one area of your life. So we keep that in mind. I'm going to take this pinpointed area. In fact, sometimes that's what in coaching they tell you to do. We're going to narrow this down to the one area that I'm going to help you work on. Right? Then you go to mentoring. And mentoring is where it's a trusted advisor. So coaching a lot of times is paid. You don't often get a free coach. They're there. It's their job. They are an expert and they are sharing their expertise with people. Mentors can be experts as well, but sometimes you're going to mentor somebody.
Yeah.
But it could be paid, or it might just be like a volunteer, like, there's this junior hire that's making some interesting choices and, their mom knows me, or like if you're younger, like their mom knows my mom and I'm making the right choices and they've asked me to mentor this junior hire.
Yeah.
Right? Happens all the time. Sorry, you're not getting paid for that. Maybe you might get your coffee paid for. Great. But so that's like a mentor. You're going to go and you're going to help this person. Usually it's very general, but you're helping them to kind of improve something in their life. So mentorship moves into discipleship when Jesus gets involved. I think that discipleship is mentorship with Jesus at the center instead of us at the center. And so mentorship, I can help and disciple other podcasters when we talk about, okay, we are podcasting. I can help you with the technical stuff. I can help you with the, how do I interview? Great. But have you thought about how is your podcast reaching the world for Jesus? Right.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that discipleship means that everything's all spiritual and woo, it's all about God. Like it's not like that. And Titus actually talks about how discipleship's very practical. It might be how to be a better employee because your boss is kind of a jerk and you're not really sure how you're supposed to respond. So, okay, let's talk about what Jesus would say about that and how we're not going to call him a jerk and how we're going to respect him.
Just keeping it real.
Right. Just keeping it real. Or maybe it's like friendships and there's a lot of conflict in your relationships and you need to figure out how to deal with those. And so you need a discipler to help you figure out what scripture says about dealing with conflict. That's real life, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship with somebody, conflict is going to happen. And so how do we do that? And so I think that that's the difference between mentorship and discipleship is we make Jesus the foundation instead of ourselves.